Somewhere in US, there is a guy that made history with wrestling action figures. He made awesome legend for Jack's Pacifics, many legend of the golden era. And today, he made action figures for AEW. And this man is Jeremy Padawer. Welcome, my friend.
Honestly, it's the best introductions ever. You are a genius. I don't know what else to say.
Thank you so much. And thank you to come back in my show.
My pleasure.
This is the episode number 26 of my show. I'm very happy to have you again because I like what you did in wrestling in the past and also today. And I will start with this. How start your passion for wrestling?
Oh my goodness. Well, I grew up in small towns in the South in the United States, in Tennessee and Mississippi and all of those very small states and small towns in those states. And when I was a little boy, I would watch wrestling on TV and I would go to the wrestling matches. And one time I remember when I was around 11 years old, I was at Columbus, Mississippi's auditorium, very small town, 20,000 people. And Ric Flair was there defending his NWA championship. And I waited about 4 feet away, very close to where a curtain was to open up and Ric Flair was to come out. And I had a Polaroid camera to take a picture. And so Ric Flair opens the curtains. I immediately snap the photo, big flash. He throws his arms out like this and pushes me down. And I take a second picture and his hands out like this. And it was one of the greatest moments of my life. And I realized if I could do anything around wrestling in my career, part of my career could have anything to do with wrestling, that would be amazing. So it's pretty great that it has.
Awesome. Very cool. Speaking of your career in wrestling, you did a lot of WWF Golden Era characters in the Jack's Pacifics. Let me know how start that at that time.
Well, so what happened was in the late 1990s, it was the Attitude Era in WWE and WWF and WCW. And that was a massive era of competition where you had two Goliath billionaires battling week to week over ratings and over and over eyeballs, just over the concept of people watching what they're doing and paying huge contracts. And there was a residual big effect to the sales of consumer products. So toys by 1999 were selling tremendous amounts of volume, just big volume. But by 2002, when I became involved, and I went over to a company called Jax to be their head of action figures and boys business at that time, WWE was struggling. They were almost off the shelf at Walmart, and the reason why is because they were basically everyone was treating action figures and specifically wrestling action figures like toys instead of collectibles. So when I came and I said, you know what, I think we need to manage these like collectibles, limit the number of units per series, more waves per year, limited editions, limited decos, better sculpt, real scale sculpting. And I went to Vince McMahon with a plan on how to engage with the alumni roster. And it was called Classic Superstars. And I sat with Vince, and because I was a huge fan as a kid, and I spent so much time watching these guys wrestle in the 1980s and late 1970s and mid 1980s. I was like fully aware. And I said, Mr. McMahon, and he's like, yeah. I was like, here's my plan. It's called, Classic Superstars, and it leverages the historical roster. And he was like, this is good, but what happens? He was concerned with what happens to an alumni or a classic wrestler if I sign them, and then WWE wants to start an alumni group or an alumni organization. And I said, well, what if we have a contract with individual superstars or athletes, and each time you sign someone, my contract automatically expires, the athlete gets paid out entirely, and you get the rights, but I retain the toy rights. And he agreed to that. And so that is what kicked off Classic Superstars. And it allowed us to recreate wrestling around the concept of collectability instead of around the concept of toys. And from there, we made hundreds of classics, and it was a remarkable run, and it really helped reignite the entire category.
It's so cool, and also a big deal because today many people still to love these figures of Jax because you did many first time ever figures. I remember guys like Big Cat Ernie Ladd or Peter Maivia, these figures that never happened before, or Jimmy Valiant. I remember Anson Jimmy Valiant. So many deep cut inside the historic roster for the golden era, but also for the when it was WWF in the 70s, also in the same time. And by the way, this stuff that you did with Jax is also my inspiration for my. I show you last time a stop motion for that of my federation because I did some custom with my friends with some of those characters that you did in Jax form, and never happened later because now in Mattel there are some classic character, but not some deep cut like you did with Jax. And so cool that, in my opinion. Also, because you did some referee figure. I remember Jax, Danny Davis, and Earl Ebner, and also Earl Ebner. We have Earl Ebner also in AEW. Is correct?
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. You know, look, the referees, and interestingly enough, even I think we fully understand how important fans are now to the entire universe of wrestling, because we had a full year and a half with no fans in the stands because of COVID. But now we know that fans and we are a very critical part of that entire experience. So yeah, referees and announcers and and even fans should all be celebrated within the universe of action figures.
And speaking of action figure in general, what is your philosophy about articulation? Because we know we have two different way to concept the articulation. One is fully articulated double joints for knee and elbow to have a better pose for your figures. But sometimes there is another school for that to have less articulation but more respect for the skull for the figures. I remember, for example, we talked about a few moments ago the Jax have a beautiful sculpt, a beautiful likeness also for the shape of the body, and maybe less articulation than some modern figures today. What is your opinion about articulation for the action figures?
You know, you can have too much and you can have too little. And I think that as long as the action figures that you're making are posable and you can make and you can engage in a very normal way without it being too flimsy, then you've probably found a happy medium. I liked the deluxe aggression figures that we made back in the Jax days. And I feel like that has kind of been modified now in the way that the modern action figures are made. Sometimes, however, you know, in some lines, you want to have a basic segment of business at a lower price point. So if you're trying to sell product to like dollar stores or value channel or grocery drug, you often have to have a lower priced option. And so that's where the lower articulation figures often come into play.
Okay, and speaking of action figure again of wrestling, to me, in my opinion, I like when you got with the figures also the same proportion for the character. For example, remember your in the Jax, I remember Giants Gonzalez was taller than a short guy like Bret Hart, and you used at the time different body part for different type of character. For example, Yokozuna has a bigger fat body than Earthquake, and Earthquake bigger than Hulk Hogan, for example. Today,
Yeah.
for example, Mattel, something that I don't like for Mattel, that they did maybe some big guy looks like too small. Like I saw a tugboat for Mattel with a tiny body, tiny maybe good likeness for the face, but the body respect not very well the proportion. In my opinion, what is your opinion about that? The different for the proportion for the figures.
I have to say, I think one thing that Mattel did really well when the license was switched over in 2010 was they really focused on proportion and scale amongst the normal roster, amongst the general everyday roster. I haven't spent too much time thinking about what they do with the larger characters, but I can tell you that it often becomes cost inefficient to really create the size or height of a body style within the line, especially if they have a lot of deco. It's something that obviously, from my perspective, I would 100% do it. I can understand why someone wouldn't, but also, sometimes the estate of characters and sometimes the former wrestlers themselves imagine themselves a little bit differently than they actually looked. Where they may think they were a little bit more fit, or maybe they think they were a little bit more proportional. But the truth is they weren't. And so that's also a give and take conversation sometimes. So the way I look at it is, I've often felt I think that, Mattel stepped it up on scale. I think what we did really great back in the day was an amazing volume and breadth of line. Like we had every single character you could think of, and obviously there were some that we missed, but it was just because we ran out of time. It wasn't because we ran out of the intention to do it. So that's my take on it. By the way, my favorite wrestlers of all time are giants and big fat dudes. I always loved the big guys. Always. I always thought they were so fascinating. And one man gang back in the day, or Yokozuna, or Haystacks Calhoun, like all those big guys, man, they were fascinating to me. And they all had sort of they would do the splash, they would do the corner smash, they would they would step on a hand. Like it was all, but for me, it was just fascinating. Kamala was a big athlete, amazing guy. That guy could really move. Abdullah the Butcher, he focused on brutality versus anything else. But all of these characters, to me, the objective is to create them as genuinely as humanly possible, and to try to convince them that their true look, was critical to recreate.
We are on the same page. Speaking of giants and big super heavyweight in wrestling, because in my opinion, they are a part of the mystique of wrestling. And
Absolutely.
to me, I think in a roster we need giants, we need super heavyweight. Like you told, Ace-Tax. I remember Ace-Tax Saloon is one of the biggest of all time. Or I remember in the early WWF Man Mountain Mike,
Yes.
another crazy fight against Ace-Tax Saloon, another big, huge country boy. And I like this type of character. And I put this character also in my Wrestling Federation in action figures because I like to create this stuff. For example, today in wrestling, I believe that we have some giants, but maybe we lost a little bit this concept, because if you watch both AEW and WWE, we have some giants, but find some huge fat guys like one man gang. It's difficult to find. What do you think about this new situation for wrestling?
I agree with you. I think more body types and more body styles is a good thing. I think one thing that AEW's done a good job is like some of the skinny guys are getting a lot of work, but it would be really good. Like I've seen some heavy dudes do some pretty massive maneuvers off of top ropes and backflips, and like there's some really athletic big people out there. Not just guys, men and women. And it really makes for a very interesting interplay of characters. So, I the things that I like in wrestling, like I said, I like the giants, the big people. I like the face masks, and I like the colorful face paint. I think Darby Allin and Thunder Rosa are great examples of people that are really getting it in that regard. And you know what? It'll pay off for them from a consumer product standpoint. Rey Mysterio is one of the biggest action figure sellers of all time. Sometimes he would even surpass John Cena. And it wasn't because Rey Mysterio was necessarily bigger than Cena, but it was because Rey Mysterio had a very, very interesting look. And also I would say within a specific population, like the Latin population with Rey Mysterio was so supportive and embraced him. But he broke out and was big with everybody.
And speaking of the AEW roster, now we have some appearance also with some legends. Jake Snake, we know also Baiso, also in the last couple of weeks, also Aku and his giant son. There is any plan in the future to have also Aku or his giant, because he's a real giant, his son, in the future in AEW figures?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I will say the philosophy that we have at Jazwares now in terms of creating action figures for AEW is very broad. Like we want to celebrate the entire roster, but it takes time to build a footprint at retail. It takes time to have enough space at retail. You have to convince retail to give you more space. And over time, we will absolutely do so.
Awesome. And speaking of the process to create an action figure, for example, from AEW, one guy on AEW, what is the steps, the process? When you decide to which character, you talk also with the wrestler or not, for example?
Yeah, so the process is we will communicate to AEW our desired list of athletes, wrestlers to create, and we will negotiate over the characters and the timelines. And then once all of that's resolved, we will start submitting concepts against each wave where we show like a 2D art style where you see the art, and then we'll get sculpt approved where you'll actually physically see the sculpt of the character. And then we go to manufacturing, and that process, and then before we actually manufacture, there's one last checkpoint where there's a review of the final engineering production sample, which is essentially, it looks and feels just like it should when it's in manufactured form, but it's not fully approved to go yet. And then we'll go to manufacturing where everything happens on lines where, just like you were doing any sort of line of manufacturing. But the process of concept to manufacturing is about 6 to 8 months, and then shipping it to get on shelf is another 2 or 3 months. So realistically, it's a 9 to 12 month time frame. And so, we can rush certain characters and certain athletes for sure, but generally speaking, we're talking about 9 to 12 months.
Okay, a long process, by the way. And speaking of, once again, EW, we know that one of the main characters is Chris Jericho, because I believe Chris Jericho looks like a genius because he's a so creative wrestler and also an artist, a musician. And you did also with AEW Jazwares awesome figures for Jericho. You talked with Jericho a little bit during this process. What is his opinion of his configure? How is Jericho in real life?
Yeah, I'm very friendly with Chris. He is a full on passionate, not just the athlete, but the performer, the show person, the executive. He's a very smart business person. He's just sort of a Renaissance man, he's like, he does a lot. And I think he's fully aware of his legacy. In fact, he's one of the few people I've ever seen that takes such detailed notes of each match. And he's even published books about that. He's a fascinating person, and I also find him to be very, lack of a better word, but very respectful, like very understanding that even though he's a celebrity and known, that other people exist. Like sometimes you'll run into someone that they find themselves being the only person in the room. They're so well known or famous, but Chris has been great to all of us, and he's been a real, like, normal, smart person to work with.
Awesome, awesome. And speaking of your career in general, I know that I saw on the web also that you worked also as a producer Japanese cartoon called Monsuno. I saw that on the web. It's correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So many years ago, when again, in my previous employment, before I was a partner in a company, I was an executive. And my role was to head up marketing and business development and brand, and I wanted to create a TV show. I saw that it had worked at another company called Spin Master. They created something called Bakugan, and was very inspired by that. So the objective was to be inspired by some inventor item, and then create a story around that inventor item, and then find major broadcasters and distributors to support it. And so there was a little spinning device that we saw. It was like a little cylinder that you'd flick it and it would spin. And I thought, what would happen if a genie were to pop out of that? And essentially what we did was we created a brand called Monsuno, where there was basically a monster that would fit inside of a cylinder. And when you spun it, the monster would pop out and be ready for battle, like a transforming monster. And we convinced Fremantle Entertainment. They make all the Idol shows around the world. We convinced Topps Trading Card Company and Michael Eisner, who was the former CEO of Disney, and Dentsu, which is the largest advertising agency and broadcaster in Japan. And together we brought Monsuno to life, and Nickelodeon aired 65 episodes of it. There was a lot of product sold, and it was really an amazing learning experience for me.
Awesome. You did in your career many different stuff and many interesting stuff. And I believe also behind the scene it's not easy do your job. What is the secret to become Jeremy Padawer?
Oh man, that's a really interesting question for me. I think the secret is to not fall completely into other people's expectations, and to be a bit of your own person, because early on in my career, what I realized and what I learned was, just because my bosses were doing something doesn't mean that I should do exactly what they're doing if I believed in something else. And I stuck to that all the way through, and it differentiated me. Now, if you're going to take that strategy, you really better be able to carry it off. You better be right more than you're wrong. And for the most part, I've been right more than I'm wrong. And, I've had very supportive people. In my current situation at Jazwares, I'm on the leadership team with a lot of smart people, and they trust me. And I feel like that trust goes a long way. So for me, it allows me to be me. But if I'm ever in a situation where people don't allow me to be me, I'm out, because that's what I bring to the table.
Okay, you I believe in 2002, or I don't remember the year, but I believe in the beginning of 2000, you reborn the Master of the Universe with 2000X.
Yeah.
And we talked about it last time. But did you with a new different type of Master of the Universe? And today we have a lot of different type of Master of the Universe. Did you see the trailer of Revelation and the other one? What do you think about the new Master of the Universe?
I don't know yet. I saw the Netflix trailer. I haven't watched the show yet. It was very familiar. That one seemed very familiar. The latest one, I was going to watch the trailer the other night, and I didn't yet. I've seen the toys. They're definitely a big, a difference from the original. What I love about Masters of the Universe is variety, like serious variety in the toys. So if you focus too much on He-Man or Skeletor, I think you're missing the point. Masters of the Universe is much more like wrestling or Star Wars than it is like a brand where you have a hero like Spider-Man. So if you're not treating Masters of the Universe like Star Wars or wrestling, you're missing the point. But I haven't studied how they're treating it. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, yes, because we know the fan are split now for this revelation, because sometimes the people prefer the old one. But in my opinion, in general, it's important to have a good vibe because we talks about something to have a fun, action figure, wrestling. And sometimes I know the fans fight each other also for wrestling because today we have people that love AEW and WWE. But in my opinion, it's good that we have two different way of wrestling. For example, my wrestling, my personal wrestling, is still the WWF or the Golden Era, and not it will be my favorite for all time. But with another channel of wrestling, I follow both WWE and AEW because I think if you love wrestling, you need to try to follow everything to understand the different type of wrestling, not to start a war between two type of fans. But we know
Yes.
this is typical of maybe the human being is typical to fight
Yes.
each other for something.
I think you're right. I will say I really admire the way Tony Khan has opened the forbidden doors of wrestling and allowed other alliances to be part of the show. It allows them to do something that reminds me more of the old regional wrestling, when there would be little regions that people would come and visit. Kamala would come to town for 6 weeks and then be out because he lost a loser leave town match. And I like that. I like these, these guys getting that opportunity to wrestle in many of the different areas. It makes them more relevant. It makes the storylines more interesting. It gives them longevity in a way that you can't achieve if you're so specifically and strictly under one roof with no chance, to show your stuff outside of that.
Yes. Before to continue, can I show you my latest episode of stop motion?
Yeah, let's see it.
Because it's yeah, I have this show and this channel with my, I call it this federation, my WWF Hasbro Federation with the legend. I show you last time an episode. This is the last episode before Summers because this Saturday will be a SummerSlam show. So there we go. I give you also some description for the match.
Let's see it. That's awesome.
And this is Wrestling Challenge. Bobby the Brain Heenan and Jim Ross in the broadcast position. Introduce the show. This is our Finkel with Danny Davis in the first match with Paul Orndorff with Bobby the Brain Heenan against Duke the Dumpster Droese for the $1 Million Championship. And they fight in this match. 1, 2, 3, and Duke the Dumpster Droese retains the belt. This is Buddy Rose, the Playboy Buddy Rose, against George the Animal Steel, with Captain Walban in the corner for Animal Steel. And they still win the match. And the main event is Intercontinental Championship, Salvatore Sincere against Sabasimba. And they fight, and Sabasimba win the match. This is all.
That's awesome. I love that. Absolutely fantastic, man. That's better than some of the live television events I've seen in the last few years.
Yes, this is. I wrote also the storyline, and I like to create some match that never happened before. Like for example, Sabasimba against Sincere. They were in WWF in different moments, and I like to create this stuff write the storyline, especially to the people that like me like this old golden eras days. And back to AEW Jazwares, I saw on the on Ringside Collectible now we have available the barbed wire action pack. Tell me now something about that because it's different. It's not just an action figure; it's more.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch AEW or you watch, some of the smaller offerings out there, like I know Matt Cardona has been very active recently in one of them, GCW. But if you look at the stuff that's out there, the concept of the matches staying in a ring where there's no accessories and nothing happening is sort of outdated right now. Extreme Championship Wrestling in the mid '90s really brought forth and brought into the forefront the concept of like backyard wrestling and like hardcore wrestling and extreme wrestling, and it's faded away for the most part. But I think some of the indies and regional wrestling that exist today brought it back. And so there is a level of relevance as long as the guys are being safe. And so, we celebrate the concept of, what I would say is safe, but more hardcore style with that item. And so some of the items that you find in those more extreme matches would be found in that accessory set.
Okay, so also on Jazwares website, they work also on UFC. You work also on UFC figures?
Yeah, in fact, this is the second time I've been involved with the UFC figures. The first time was the first time that they were ever out. We did a deal with Dana in 2008, I believe, Dana White and the UFC. And at the time, they didn't have any of their UFC MMA fighters under any sort of consumer products contract. And a small company of two really cool brothers, Round 5, had signed a lot of these athletes up to deals. So we had a conflict. We had to figure out a way to make it work. And what we did was we basically swapped the right for Round 5 to utilize the actual UFC licensing for us to have the opportunity to use the athletes. And it all worked out, but it was intense, and it's quite a story. So today at Jazwares, we've brought UFC back, and the first wave sold pretty well. And but it's a challenge to get more waves into the marketplace in a very, very competitive action figure aisle. So we're constantly pushing and driving, and I think that we're going to have success there because we have a lot of power in the action figure side. But the truth is, we're looking for the right opportunity to get the next wave in stores.
And speaking of creating something in general for your job, your career, what is difficult create a balance between the reality of the toy business and your dream project?
No, not really. Not at this point, because I'm very much realistic about what's possible and what's not possible. I try to push the boundaries. Like today, you can do things that are at higher price points. You can do $100 item or a $200 item. Even more, if you saw that with the latest ring that came out with Mattel, is $250 crowdfunded. Very interesting. I mean, obviously, I will say I started that well back in the day with the authentic scale product, but you couldn't sell a $250 item 15 years ago, and you can certainly do that now. So I think that the boundaries of what the imagination allows for have been pushed. I mean, you can see that there's the opportunity to do something that's super, super authentic and maybe more expensive. And maybe there used to only be an opportunity to do the cheaper stuff. So, that's the reason why you had the basic figures. That's the reason why you had Ruthless Aggression and Deluxe Aggression. But nowadays, it certainly seems like it's evolved quite a bit.
Okay, do you like to answer a couple of questions from the fan on the chat now?
Absolutely, sure.
There is a question for Paltrax. Could the Forbidden Door concept go into the toys as well? Impact for one doesn't have a toy deal.
I think that it's possible, and I think that it's something that will certainly, our objective is to create a very broad lineup, and so it's something that I think we can. Best way to say it is we can open up additional space at retail, and that's a very viable way to do so.
Okay, there is another one by Mr. Free to Be Me One. I would love to see an arena that you can connect the crowd bleachers and steps together in one big elf circle to fit around a scale ring. No one has done it yet.
Interesting. Well, we're doing something in soon that will have some of that. So keep your eyes open. I think it'll be a very good start to what you're looking to accomplish.
Okay, another question, maybe the last for the fan. Anthony Frederick, man, this is a comment because he put this question before the stream. And he says, I really hope to ask you if he can do a classic superstar like again, like maybe a great mood of Owen Hart. But
Yeah,
now
I
you're
mean, yeah, no, I think obviously that is exactly the type of thing that I would love to do, and I've done it in the past. So I think again, at first it's about convincing retail to give you space, and then it's about expanding that space. And we're in the space expansion business now with AEW because it's been proven. It's like a proven entity. And I think that the ideas that have been presented today are spot on. I mean, they're exactly right. And so don't be surprised if you see some of these things come to light very soon.
awesome. And you saw also on Ring Cycle Collectibles, the ring play set and this different stuff. So more, not just action figure, but more. What is the difference to create a play set ring and or an action figure? There are more difficulty because of the price or not?
I think it's probably, sometimes it just depends. I mean, I think action figures, we have a pretty streamlined approach to how we go about it. If you're creating a ring that has certain play value, like if it has a cage or it has a ladder match or it has a hanging briefcase or it has a elimination chamber or something, sometimes the engineering around that is a little bit more significant, and therefore it puts you in a scenario um, where the development is more challenging for sure.
Okay, we talked about earlier about that you are like me, you are a wrestling fan. What is for Jeremy Padawer your favorite, the best ever match in wrestling history for you?
One of my favorites was Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy. That was a very early WrestleMania match, and I was really caught up in it. It was amazing. They did an amazing job developing the storyline of that. Another one of my favorite matches was really an angle, and it was Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman.
Awesome.
And that was just an amazing angle. It really, I think people didn't know what was real and what was not real, and they did a phenomenal job at blurring the line. And those were two of my all time favorite for sure.
You pick some of the two that I like so much because speaking of King Kong Bundy, Hulk Hogan, I saw last yesterday, I believe, I rewatched the cage match on WrestleMania 2, the main event, and the character of King Kong Bundy was very looks like a between an horror character and also Adam Family Uncle Fester because looks like a little bit a large version. But this match was for that time brutal because Bundy started bleeding and it was so cool. And speaking of Andy Kaufman, in my opinion, was a genius. Andy
Yeah,
Kaufman.
Absolutely.
Did you see the movie of Milos Forman, Man on the Moon?
I did. And I thought that Jim Carrey did a beautiful job in the portrayal of Andy Kaufman and probably has a lot in common with him.
Yes, I remember also, if I corrected it, you did an action figure for Andy Kaufman with Jax. Is correct?
Yeah, we did, and I in fact had some conversations with Andy Kaufman's estate, and sometimes they would play games with me. So there was a phone call where I was ambiguous as to who I was talking to. So I just say that they're definitely keeping his memory alive in a very in a way that he would probably very much appreciate.
Awesome, awesome. And you did a lot of stuff in your career, but there's something, a license, for example, that you never got and you want to have maybe in your future?
In the toy space, I feel really great about some of the things that's happened. In fact, one of the things that we've recently done is there's a brand called CoComelon in the preschool space, and for me, it was an ambition for me, personally, to help find a massive preschool property, and that's it. It's one of the largest in the world. So, our company is really doing amazing things with that brand, but I'm running out of things that I want to accomplish in toys, and that's just the truth. I mean, it's been an amazing run, and I think I could do it for many more years, enjoyably. But really, it's been a complete blast.
And speaking of your job in general, because I understand that you love your job, so you're a lucky man, because I believe when someone wake up and go to and we live a life for the job that you love is a better thing for your life. How
Yeah.
many hours do you spend every day for your job?
Um, you know, for me, it's a little bit difficult because I tend to live it. I don't ever turn it off. So I spend 7:30 a.m. to probably 5:30 working with other people in a work environment, calls, and then I talk about the topics that I work on social media when I'm not working. So there's a lot of it's a little bit different because I'm not necessarily just talking about toys. I'll talk about collectibles, and I'll talk about other things that our company Jazwares doesn't make. But like, I never turn it off. I feel like I'm constantly living it, and that's I feel very passionate about what I do. So even when I'm watching TV, even when I'm watching, I watch content for the purpose of finding the next opportunity to make collectibles or toys. So there's always, yeah.
I understand very well that, because it's the same to me as a writer, as a musician, or as a YouTuber. Because as an artist, you work every day, every day. There's no holiday, because also where you are, you got some holiday, you start to think about new project, about new novel, some video. So it's the same stuff. When you love your job is every moment of your life, and this is super cool in my opinion. The last questions,
Yeah.
because everybody remember, this is just like a wrestling match. This interview is scheduled for one fall with a 45 time limits, with one corner Mr. Alan in the world of toys and the other corner Jeremy Padawer. The last question is, I follow you also on Instagram, and I like your sense of humor that you put in your social media.
Thank you.
What is your philosophy behind that in general for social media?
I think that, lean into yourself, lean into who you really are. If you're, a partner in a company or the head of a company or an employee, there are certain rules So you would never, there's certain things that you would never say or never do because you have responsibilities towards other, but you also have a responsibility towards yourself. And so lean into who you are organically and follow a set of reasonable expectations. And that's what I do. I love people. I love interacting with people. Once we sold our company a few years ago and became part of this larger organization, I made a determination that, for me, influencing others is more important than my own career progression at this point. I get more value out of that. I really love the idea that other people could be inspired to do something professionally or personally by something I might say. And I recognize I'm a very tiny piece, a speck of dust in the whole scheme of things. But if I do influence a few people, that would really mean a lot to me personally. It'd be very fulfilling to think that, the next person that makes toys may have heard something I said and found it possible.
Awesome. And now I go to the piano because it's time to say goodbye. Thanks for watching, my friend. And don't forget to follow him, Jeremy Padawer, on social media. Because on social media, he became also a comedy man. And don't forget to support AEW Figure because more awesome stuff are coming. And don't cry, guys, because I believe that Jeremy will return in the future. It's right. Thank you, guys. Thanks for watching. And thank you, Jeremy. Thank you to everyone. And thank you, Jeremy, to come back. And I hope that you will return also in the future for another awesome conversation together.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you. And thank you all for collecting Jazwares action figures and AEW and Pokemon and Halo and Fortnite, Roblox, all of those things. It really means a lot to all of us at the company. And I know that from our CEO down, we're all thrilled to be a part of all of this. So thank you so much.
And more is coming.
More is coming.
Thanks for watching, guys. Goodbye to everyone. Have a nice day, my friends. Goodbye.